Lesson 2.5, Solid Modeling. In this lesson, you will learn how to use solid modeling to create more complex models. You will learn how to use Add Solid. You will learn how to use Subtract Solid. You will learn how to use Intersect Solid. And you'll learn how to use automatic working planes. Back to Vectorworks. Open the file Exercise 2.5 from your exercise folder. If you've forgotten where to get these, don't forget that the first lesson had the download link. Select both of these objects. Now you'll have to go to the edge of these objects unless you set up a rendered view. Remember, we can set the rendered view here using OpenGL rendering. The reason I say you'll have to go to the edge, if you have a look at the object, just make sure you have a look at the cursor. It's got that arrow. When you go near the edge, it can see the object. When you go away from the edge, it can't. If you render the view, then you won't have to worry about this. So if we do the OpenGL rendering, you can see it finds the edge all over the place. So let's go back to wireframe. So select both those objects. Select that cylinder, select this other object, right-click on one of the edges, and we'll choose Add Solids. And so Vectorworks has taken our two objects and joined them into a more complex 3D object. This is a great way of creating a very complex object by taking simple forms and adding them together. Let's just undo that. So we'll just go up to Edit and Undo. Right click again. This time we'll choose Subtract Solids. Now in this case, Vectorworks wants to know which is the base object. In other words, which object will be left behind. If I click on that arrow, it will make the cylinder left behind. So when I go OK, you can see it's cut the edge off the cylinder. Let's undo that. We'll do that again. Let's go back to Subtract Solids. We'll do the other object this time. You can see the cylinder's now punched a hole in my block. Undo that. Let's go right click and we'll choose Intersect Solids. In this case, it calculates where the two solids overlap, and that's all you see. These three techniques, the Add Solid, the Subtract Solid, and the Intersect Solids, are what you need to make very complex objects. Sometimes you'll use one and then you'll use the other to get the object that you want. I'm going to render the view now, so I'm going to go to OpenGL, and I'm going to set my options to be quite high. So draw edges, very high, OK. So I've got an extrusion, I've got that object. If I just move that out of the way, you can see I'm back to my original objects. So now when I go Subtract Solids, there we are there, and you can retain the subtracting objects or to leave them behind. I'm just going to turn that off, OK, and there's my hole. So when I turn my view around, you can see right through the object. It's really handy to be able to do that. I'd also like to show you how we can use automatic working planes. So I'm just going to undo, get back to that point there. I'm going to select that cylinder and delete it. So now I don't have the cylinder that I needed. I'm going to use my circle tool. I'm going to place a cylinder, well, place a circle to start with. So you'll notice that I've detected that as the working plane. Not the top, but that face there. So I've got my cursor just inside that face. Click to start. Click to finish. That creates my circle. Now when I pull this through and snap to the back edge, what I need to do next, just before I click, hold down the Alt or the Option key. You have to hold it down and then click. And that then makes a Subtract Solid. So you can see it's actually punched a hole right through there. Let me show you that again. So we'll go here, we'll make a circle, we'll pull that through, snap to that edge there, hold down the Alt key, click, and that's created another hole. So I've now got two holes. These two holes slightly overlap if you notice. There they are. That is a very quick way of creating a Subtract Solid. If I do the same thing, only this time I move away from the object, so this time I'll click and I'll pull it out here. Again, the Option of the Alt key and I click. That is now a solid addition. So just have a look here. That's a solid addition. The previous ones were solid subtractions. I'll just undo that and undo that again. Remember what we said about extrusions. If you double click on them, it allows you to go back and edit the original 2D shape used to create the extrusion. Double click on this. This is a solid subtraction. So that's my original object used to create my solid subtraction. So let's just turn that in a view like this. I want to go to a front view. There it is there. And I'm going to use my move command. Now we haven't used this before. Modify, move, and move. So I'm going to move this in the Y direction. So X goes across, Y goes up and down. And I'm going to move it down by ½ an inch. Remember to use minus, so minus 0.5 of an inch. And it moves that down. I could do that again, move that down, and let's move it minus 1 inch. So there it is, it's quite close to the bottom. When I exit my solid subtraction, you can see Vectorworks updates my view, it updates my object, and that hole has now been moved. So once you've created your solid addition or your solid subtraction, you can still go back and edit it. Remember, if we use the automatic working planes and we go into the object, that will then be a solid subtraction. If we come away from the face of the object, in other words come outside the object, that becomes a solid addition. So I'm going to draw a rectangle just in here. I'm going to pull that through. I might want that distance to only be 0.5. Now 0.5 will actually come towards me. You might notice the distance is currently -8. So minus 0.5, enter, and then Control. Then we want to hold down the Alt or the Option key, click, and that'll just take a ½ inch cut out of our object. So it starts to become really quick to model in Vectorworks if we use Add Solid, Subtract Solid, and the automatic working planes. This is the end of lesson 2.5. In this lesson you learned how to use solid modeling to create more complex models. You learned how to use Add Solid, you learned how and when to use Subtract Solid, and you learned how to use and when to use Intersect Solid. And you learned how to use automatic working planes.